Chapter 2.4 Sculpture Part 2. We left off with this piece, which is a high relief. The Shield Jaguar, and Lady Zoc. So there is high relief here, bas relief, and it's also somewhat sunken relief. So to break that down, if you see shadows, generally speaking, these hard shadows, then you know you have high relief. That's really one of the clues that you're going to know that there's more dimensionality, there's more depth. That really is what indicates high relief. So down in here we have more high relief. We have more carving around her hand. Her arm is coming out um, a little bit further from this flat plane. This arm is a little bit lower and only like about a quarter of its dimensionality is coming off of her chest. So there's a real difference between these two arms. The rope is fully rendered and carved out. So we go all the way back to this flat plane here. There's sort of like a background behind the two figures. And because this has got some flat areas that remain around here, that's where we get the sunken relief in the sense that it's carved down in. So there's, if you were to put a ruler or something flat across here, a number of things would be touching that high surface. So carved deep into high relief. Then we have sunken relief where it's just carved into and some of the border and other parts remain. These glyphs here, that's what they're called. They're symbols with different meanings. Those are in bas relief. Those are not dimensional. They are just carved and sort of outlined. Her necklace, her pattern of her dress here, those are bas relief. We're going to move on to the Renaissance with Michelangelo. This is Prisoner. And this is an unfinished piece, but it gives us some clues into what the sculpting process in stone in particular is like, especially in the Renaissance. Well, I would say stone carving is still done in similar ways, but Michelangelo is one of the best stone sculptors who has ever lived. And he was really good at looking at a stone and figuring out what would come out of that stone, if that makes sense. He had such a strong relationship to the material and such a strong vision as a sculptor. He would understand how to make this figure work with this particular stone, and he would just be able to see it and start carving into it and then create a fully in the round three-dimensional carved sculpture. We know him best, perhaps, Michelangelo, from the Sistine Chapel. We do. But one of the things, he was not a natural painter, did not enjoy painting. He did this under the request of the Pope for the Vatican. And he wanted to get it done as quickly as possible to get back to his sculpting, but it took many, many years to finish. One thing you'll note in these figures is the implied three-dimensionality and the implied mass of the musculature and the implied three-dimensionality of these figures. He even creates a shadow in the painting on this fresco to indicate that this leg is, coming out of the picture plane, that it is three-dimensional. It is not. This is trompe-l'oeil. This is giving us a false sense of three-dimensionality, but he's so very good at understanding the figure and the dimensions of these bodies that he convinces us that it looks three-dimensional. He even does this as well with the stone. This isn't the best example, this photo, but in this case here, this is an actual architectural detail here. This is a piece of stone that does really exist, and then he painted in right here uh, pieces to look like stone, if that makes sense. The blocks that these figures are sitting on, those are painted. That is real. This is painted. In some cases, in some photos, it looks very much more convincing. Here, there's a bit of overexposure, perhaps, and it looks a little washed out. But look at all this musculature and shadow. It's incredible. So this is what he wanted to finish. and well, let's look at our dates. 1508 to so for 4 years he's working on this, and then 1513 he finally gets back to what he began with the tomb of Julius II, the Pope, and this is a detail of Moses. Now Moses, um, this is an interesting just side note. The horns here, um, these were a mistranslation because you know how we associate horns with the devil or evil or goats back into pagan mythology, Bacchus. So this was a mistranslation, and I can't recall if it's the Greek or the Hebrew, but Moses was thought to have horns, but it was a synonym, a word that meant something else. Nonetheless, once this was sculpted and then Michelangelo passed away, many years later they discovered the mistranslation and they left the sculpture as is. Nobody wanted to touch his beautiful sculpture of Moses. But look at the musculature, look at all the veins and in the hand, all of this drapery and folding. I mean, really imagine with no power tools, you're taking a hammer and chisel and you're slowly extricating all this stone, you're carving. This is a subtractive process, meaning once the stone is carved away, you can't put it back. There are some fixes that do occur, but they're not great, and you don't want them in the focal point or anywhere noticeable in the piece. But Michelangelo did not employ those types of fixes. But you just see all this incredible drapery. I mean, think about just carving out somebody's toe and toenails. Just mind-boggling. Absolutely beautiful piece. Oh, and he did believe that sculpture, and I agree with him as a sculptor, that it is the most challenging and finest of all the visual arts. So there's different types of sculpture. We just looked at subtractive, which is usually stone, but there's also wood and some other materials. But that is carving, drilling, chiseling, and so on. And then additive is where you're modeling or casting or constructing. These are two general categories. We're going to get into the details moving forward. Some nice videos. I believe you have one. You should have one as one of your quizzes. So carving is the most ancient that we know of, the most, because that's what we have found so far. Like the Venus of Willendorf is one of those examples that's quite old, thousands of years old. Excuse me. But that's some of the things that we know that still exist. And chipping away at something sculpturally, that's a very old way to work. Stone and ivory. Ivory is softer, and that is more common. And many primitive people would have more access to it because you imagine there's bones and tusks. That's usually what ivory is elephant tusks or walrus tusks. And so there would be some access to these materials. Stone, of course, would be around, but that's quite a bit harder. There's different hardnesses in stone. Marble, granite, those would be on the harder end of things. And we did look at that first example of gesso, and that's not as hard, be easier to work. So they're working on these things, chipping, carving, sanding, and polishing. And I'm going to back up just for a moment. We have a high degree of polish here on Michelangelo's sculptures. You can see the shine. So that takes a lot of like sanding with fine sandpaper and then buffing it out with a cloth. It's a very labor intensive way to work. Okay, our first example of wood carving, and this is really deceptive. This is almost 9 feet tall, and it looks like it's about 5 inches tall. But the wood grain, we can't get a very good close-up view of this, and also because this being Hawaiian, it's an unfamiliar wood perhaps to us, so it's reading as a different wood grain and quite short. So this is a war god, Kukailimoku, and these are very typical. We think about like tiki figures. We see a lot of this in popular culture. This is very popular for people to have in their homes or outdoor sculpture, that kind of thing. This was a very important piece, though, to King Kamehameha I. And I'm going to read from the book here, 247. It was originally created for him. The image of God exhibits an open mouth, a disrespectful gesture, and was probably intended to gain divine favor. Another god, Lono, god of prosperity, is also symbolized by pigs' heads in Ku's hair. The combination of the two gods may have represented Kamehameha's invasions and conquests of adjacent kingdoms. So we have a lot of iconography going on with this open mouth as disrespectful, and then pigs' heads, and the image is quite small and it's not very clear. Plus, they're very stylized. But this is a really beautifully carved piece, and it's from the 19th century, perhaps 18th century. Quite old and beautiful, and it does have some polish on here, but you can see the carving marks. That's what's so interesting as well on this piece.